But thank you all for being here today because the work continues.
That's right.
So you know me, where I first want to start with a little bit of energy. So fight, fight, fight.
Housing is a human right.
Fight, fight, fight.
Housing is a human right.
Fight, fight, fight.
Housing is a human right.
I am so proud today to be introducing alongside my colleagues the Housing Rescue and Resident Protection Act. A transformative set of reforms to the city's deeply flawed third-party transfer program, which was created in 1996 to rehabilitate distressed buildings and has proved disastrous, disproportionately impacting communities of color and targeting properties that were not even statutorily distressed, as findings from the council have found. Across New York City, hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers live in distressed buildings, 10,000 buildings with 115,000 units and owners who owe tens of millions of dollars to the city of New York. Across the city, 1 million open BNC violations, those are that are hazardous to the health and safety of New Yorkers, are open today. We're talking about children, families, elderly persons living with mold, vermin, lead, collapsed ceilings, and more. We're talking about New Yorkers like those of 2201-2205 Davidson, who you'll hear from today, whose landlord owed $25 million in municipal arrears.
Shame.
Nearly 600 open housing maintenance code violations, 83 open Department of Buildings violations, including those that are structural. And this is just a short walk away from 1915 Billingsley Terrace. They need the city to act on the conditions they're living with. And tenants at 705 and 709 West 170th Street in the Heights, with nearly 500 open violations and an owner that owes over $500,000. Their housing and their livelihoods have been left to deteriorate. And let me be clear, this is unacceptable, and the city of New York has an obligation to act now. You will hear from these folks today. So what are we doing? I want to be very clear. The third-party transfer program was disastrous in its administration in previous iterations. So what we're going to do is we're going to contrast the changes, because we want to use the city's power of municipal foreclosure, but we want to do it in a way that rescues buildings from bad conditions and protects home ownership. So, municipal foreclosure allows the city of New York to foreclose upon, to take properties away from certain owners. We know it, the lien sale was just reformed, and this is the same power that the city has in the former third-party transfer program. But the old program did a lot of horrible things. One, there was something called the block pickup, because the program was created in the 80s and 90s. So if you were on a block that had a really bad building, and you just happened to also have a house on that block, your house was also going through municipal foreclosure. The new program eliminates the block pickup. Second, buildings that are not in distress should not be targeted. A 2019 City Council audit revealed that over 50% of properties selected for TPT were not actually in physical distress. This is evidence of a misadministration of the program, if not worse. Buildings like those in my district, 1600 Nelson, whose tenants rescued the building in the 70s and the 80s and had their property taken away when there were minimal arrears and minimal violations. The new program only targets the worst, those with the most unpaid municipal debt and the most BNC hazardous violations, or as my colleague, Councilmember Shulman said, the whole buildings. Next, the old program also was found to be targeting buildings with minor arrears relative to their market values. There were 83 buildings that were not in distress by the old definition. The new program will not allow this. Residents in the old program claimed that there was no outreach, that HPD never reached out to them, despite HPD and the city's claims to the contrary. The new program institutes very stringent requirements for outreach. The old program was racially concentrated with 50% of buildings all in just 11 neighborhoods of low and moderate income communities of color. The new program will ensure that there's more rigorous outreach and that there are off-ramps for owner-occupied properties. The old program attacked home ownership with an overrepresentation of owner-occupied HDFCs, and the new program will treat these properties differently, and especially so we can protect home ownership across the city of New York. We cannot leave New Yorkers to suffer these building conditions, and we must take advantage of all of the powers of the city of New York to protect New Yorkers. The introduced bill will not be perfect. There was too much wrong with the old program. So I ask all New Yorkers to please join this amazing coalition of people who I'm going to shout out on Monday, September 30th at 1 p.m. as we have a hearing on the new program, the Housing Rescue and Resident Protection Act, here at Chambers and the New York City Council. So with that, I want to thank, roll call first and then I'll call folks up. Oh, there's more folks here, yay! Okay. Controller, thank you for being here. Council members Hanif, the Office of Councilmember Felice, Councilmember Marte, Councilmember Caban, Councilmember Stevens, Councilmember Bacher, Councilmember De La Rosa, co-prime sponsor Councilmember Gail Brewer, Councilmember Shulman, Councilmember Juan, and Councilmember Hanif again.
Yep.
Did I say it twice? She's on there twice. Really appreciate it. Councilmember Felice. And also to the organizations who gave very dedicated feedback and are here today, the Legal Aid Society, you have West Bronx Housing, Met Council on Housing, ANHD, Abolish Tax Lien Sale Coalition, CSS, Fifth Avenue Committee, Cypress Hills. But to be clear, this draft represents input from over 50 organizations and individuals who have participated in testifying, speaking out, suing the city over the last 5 years. All of that input is reflected in this bill. It's still not perfect. We're going to get it right. And now you will hear from my colleagues and from impacted individuals. So first up, I'm going to call up Controller Lander, and then we'll proceed with colleagues.
Right. Let's hear it for Council Member and Housing Chair Irina Sanchez. This is like a real act of devotion to the needs of people in our city who are living in distressed buildings in terrible housing conditions and who deserve better. And this really requires getting in the weeds, and the work that she and her coalition have put in to figure this out, to work with so many people, and also to make sure the bill gets introduced before she goes out on parental leave is pretty great. So we're saying a big thank you to you. And let me just, give shout outs to council members Marte, Hanif, Juan, Stevens, De La Rosa, Bacher, and Brewer. And thank you to all of them and to this great coalition. I'm New York City Controller Brad Lander. And first thing I want to say is I was there. I was actually working at the Fifth Avenue Committee and the board chair of the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development in 1996 when this program was first authorized. And it's worth remembering that what it replaced was the old in rem program. When a building was in terrible condition or didn't pay its taxes, the city would take it over, but then the city itself owned it for, on average, 20 years, and conditions deteriorated to hell and worse, and it took so much more money from the city to fix those buildings up. So the good idea behind third-party transfer was a faster process to getting buildings fixed up so that they could be good homes for their residents again. But as the council member made clear, as the chair made clear, unfortunately, that did not work. It did not target the worst buildings. It overrepresented buildings in Black and Latino neighborhoods. It did not support a pathway to affordable and protect affordable home ownership for New Yorkers in co-ops and HDFCs. And I am delighted to say you have done a great job, Councilmember Sanchez, Councilmember Brewer, and this team, putting a very thoughtful approach together to addressing those issues, making sure it targets the worst buildings. It does not racially discriminate, it protects home ownership, and it gets buildings back to the decent living conditions that their tenants and all New Yorkers deserve. Props, thank you, let's get it done.
So next up, I want to call Councilmember De La Rosa, and I want to do so with this context. In the city of, I know somewhere in here I have this, yep. So in the city of New York, when we talk about council district with the most open hazardous violations, it is Councilmember Feliz, Councilmember Salamanca, myself, Councilmember Stevens, Councilmember De La Rosa, Councilmember Mealy, Councilmember Salam. These communities, it's not surprising. It's not surprising where they are, and so we need this program, and I'm so happy to have Councilmember De La Rosa and your constituents here today.
So first of all, we need to thank Chair Sanchez for her leadership and her work, continuous leadership, and the coalition that is here, right? We have the front lines of housing advocates standing here with us because we understand those stats that Councilmember Sanchez just spoke about are not coincidence. It's not a coincidence why they are in the poorest working class communities of our cities, why we have the highest amount of violations. And we just came off the heels of a press conference with the Met Council who's here and Manhattan Legal Services, where the worst landlord in the city of New York, Daniel Oshilon, was arrested for the second time this week. Yesterday. But he wasn't just arrested for his neglect. He was also arrested for his refusal after a court order mandate to fix the conditions in which he's allowed these tenants to live in squalor for decades. He's refusing that, and he's trying to negotiate away his responsibilities for less jail time. We are here because we understand that these problems have policy solutions to them, and when there are systematic issues that can be fixed with, as we say, the swipe of a pen, it is our responsibility to reflect the needs of our constituents in those policies and make sure that we're not only signing up on these bills, but also helping leaders like CM Sanchez pass them. In our district, these issues, the third-party transfer issue, is critical. There are tenants that have literally been waiting their entire lives. We met a woman at 705 170th Street whose daughter is now in her 40s and wasn't born when the deterioration of that building began, and now, as a cancer survivor, is still living in that squalor. You know, the Met Council had to put together a cleanup this weekend just to return a little bit of dignity to these tenants. And so we're here to do our part to support common sense legislation that puts the power back in the hands of the city to make sure that these programs are successful. So thank you for your leadership.
I'd like to also call up, I'd also like to call up co-prime sponsor Gail Brewer.
I want to say thank you to Councilmember Sanchez, but also to the amazing draft. This is friggin' 57 pages long. I only found one typo on page 5, line 9. And there's a D missing. That's it. The entire piece of legislation. So congratulations. I look forward to the hearing. It is really important because the last program was horrible. We never could figure out who the person was who was taking over the building. They were often worse than the persons who had not paid the taxes and who were not doing the repairs. It was a horrible program. And I think we need to figure out how this fits in with the lien sale, how they work together. I have buildings that are vacant. Nobody's paid the taxes for 10 years. The rats, the mattresses, and the numbers of agencies that go there on a regular basis. Was that lien sale? Was that third-party transfer? All of these things are perfectly able to be solved with a good piece of legislation and a hearing and all these amazing groups behind it. I think we have to also be very conscious of the HCFCs. We all work with them. They need maybe a different kind of help. They need help. And the issue is this legislation could address so many of the inconsistencies that have existed in the past. So congratulations. One typo, not bad. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'd like to call up Councilmember Althea Stevens.
Well, one of the number one complaints or issues that I get in my office from tenants is the conditions that they're living in. Unfortunately, in the Bronx, and as Councilman Sanchez was pointing out, from all of the issues with tenants and things like that, they're mostly in the Bronx, and it's concentrated there. And again, that is purposeful. And so bills like this is going to help us make sure that we can actually come back to our constituents with solutions is vital. And so for me, I'm excited to stand here with my colleague and actually my sistering district to say This is us moving in the right direction. This is us being able to go home to our constituents and say, we are hearing your concerns, we are hearing your issues, and we are thinking about solutions that's going to help you. I love that we're even looking at something, at a program that was not working and saying, hey, well, let's not throw this in the garbage, let's make it work. Because I say it all the time, I don't like things that don't make sense. And so we're making something that didn't make sense make sense. I grew up in the 90s, and actually I grew up in an HSDC, so I had a building that was distressed and really was dilapidating. And at that time, tenants were able to go turn that building around and have home ownership. And so we need to think about all of these programs that were working in the past and taking a look at them, dusting them off, and updating it in the same way that Councilmember Sanchez did. Because we know that, yes, some things weren't working, but there was some good stuff in here, and we're gonna make it work. And I'm excited to be able to go back to my constituents and say, this is something tangible that we're doing for you. And this is also gonna get people in our community to say, maybe we should be looking back at government. With all that's going on, good work is still being done. Thank you.
So now I'd like to call up Edward Garcia of the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition and Melanie Lopez, a resident at 220105 Davidson.
We brought some signs here to show a lot of the organizing work that we have been doing. Hello everybody, my name is Edward Garcia. I'm an organizer with Northwest Bronx. Huge shout out Councilmember Sanchez, also to Oswald, who has been huge supporters of our work. Just want to say that you know, our organizers for a really long time have really leveraged all of the existing tools that exist to hold landlords accountable. And unfortunately, most of them don't work. With administrative complaints to housing court cases. Huge shout out also to the Legal Aid Society, who has been a partner with Northwest Bronx and also 2205 Davidson, representing a lot of the residents there. And so a lot of the, for a long time, the residents, the building of 2205 Davidson met all the necessary criteria, from unpaid charges. This property owner hasn't paid property taxes since the 70s. And we asked ourselves, how come owners like this exist? And so we're really excited that we are reconsidering the third-party transfer program to ensure property owners like this one don't get away with not paying property taxes, costing the city thousands of taxpayer dollars, right? From emergency repairs, from inspections, while tenants are paying rent. And on top of that, property owners like this use tactics, right, to scare tenants. Many of them have been taken to court. Melanie will share her story briefly, but also vacate orders that are kind of created by the negligence, right? And tenants end up houseless. So we're here to support this new introduction, and also hope that we can continue to work together to ensure that tenants are protected, and also that tenants are given the adequate support, right? We believe that this is an opportunity to create tenant ownership. And if it wasn't for the close support of Northwest Bronx and Legal Aid, 2205 Davidson might not be able to put together a comprehensive plan and actually be able to express interest in ownership, right? So I really appreciate seeing the intentional aspect of outreach and ensuring that residents get organized and express their interest, because ultimately what we really want to see is tenant control, right? That for a long time, you know, property owners are given too many chances, and this is an opportunity to create home ownership and give tenants an opportunity to collectively go. Thank you.
So I've been a resident of the Bronx for at least the last 4.5 years, which is a small amount of time compared to the majority of the people that have been in my building. When I first moved in, I was legally rented an apartment that had a roof collapse 2 years prior to me moving in, and I was unaware of this. I didn't know of the conditions of the building, but given my circumstances, I was limited, and I just picked the first place that I was accepted for. Over the years, I have seen that there have been conditions that have placed many people at risk. There are a lot of disabled people that also depend on government assistance living in the building. and they're not able to adapt to the conditions that have been present. There's asbestos, there has been roof collapse that has caused plaster to fall on the ground and be in the air, so the air is contaminated. There are rats, there are roaches, there's vermin, and despite exterminators coming, despite people supposedly coming to do inspections, there have been no improvements on the conditions. We have elders that are my neighbors and are unable to take away, bring their garbage or do what they need to do because the elevator has been broken for well over a year and a half with no attempts to repair it. There is garbage that is left about. There is no proper super to be able to maintain the space, and the conditions have just worsened over time. There is a constant smell, and I have personally been able to see that no matter what is being done on behalf of the tenants, how many times it's cleaned up, the conditions continue to be worsened. There is a lack of attention that is given to people that are under these conditions, and there is a lack of education that is not provided to people who are living under these circumstances. A proper solution would be able to be educating people to be able to form an association where they can actually be able to take ownership of the places that they live in. There isn't enough attention given to this, and with the support of people continuously, I think that we might be able to have some kind of organization to be able to actually change the conditions of our building. So, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much. $25 million, 600 open BNC violations at Melanie's building. Now I'd like to call up Eva Santos Veloz from 705 and 709 170th Street Tenant Association.
Woohoo! Thank you so much. So good afternoon. My name is Eva Santos Veloz. I'm the tenant organizer with Met Council on Housing. I stand here today to amplify the voices of all New Yorkers, but especially the voices of 705 and 709 West 107th Street Tenant Association. The tenants at 705 and 709 have been fighting for years unbearable living conditions, trash-filled hallways, severe sanitation issues, and horrible infestations until this day. No cleaning, no super, only repairs on papers for HPD to see. Their landlord, Daniel Heshelom, appointed #1 worst landlord of New York City, has neglected his responsibilities despite an initial 60-day jail sentence and yesterday a second arrest. Hundreds of violations remain unaddressed since November of 2022, and tenants continue to be under this management. How is this possible after tenants continue to be neglected? How is the city continuing for him to allow to be the owner and make decisions on the home and the life of these tenants that for too long have been trapped in unhealthy conditions, forced to live in neglect, disrespect, including harassment for using their voice. All of this while the city watch. That's why I strongly support the Housing Rescue and Resident Protection Act. It is a crucial step towards holding negligent landlords accountable like Alden Shalom and ensuring tenants get the safe homes they deserve. Yesterday's arrest is not enough. That's why we need this bill that will take the building away from landlords and avoid them causing further harm to these tenants. It's time to prioritize tenants' rights and well-being. We have tenants for 45 years on this building, seeing their children grow up in the same conditions. That is just unfair. Just last weekend, like CM Carmen de la Rosa mentioned, we organized a cleanup. Just because tenants are taking matters into their own hands once again, because they're just tired and fed up and living in filth. We need a city where leaders prioritize affordable housing and understand that housing is a human right, not a luxury for the few. Landlords need to be held accountable the real way. Taking these properties away, the recent arrest of this landlord, including the federal charges against Major Eric Adams this morning, underscores the need for better leadership in our city, in our building, and in our country. This bill offers hope for a better future, one where tenants can break free from neglect for landlords and live with dignity and respect. So let's pass this bill to be able to help the tenants at 705 and 709 and all New Yorkers like myself. I've been in this city for 26 years. I'm experiencing neglect from my own landlord, being a tenant organizer, So we need to come together and do something about it. So I'll stand strongly with our tenant association and thankful for Met Council and Senator Robert Jackson, Carmen De La Rosa, and every single one elected that is standing here with us today and on this fight to be able to give them a better life. Thank you so much.
Fight, fight, fight.
Housing is a human right.
Fight, fight, fight.
Housing is a human right.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to call up Councilmember Lincoln Ressler.
It's good to be with you all. I really want to just express my most profound gratitude to our extraordinary chair of Housing and Buildings, my friend and colleague Irina Sanchez. Can we give her a big round of applause? Look, we all know that the third-party transfer program has not worked perfectly in the past. In fact, it's been all kinds of fucked up. And it needed significant reform. And we have a leader in our Housing and Buildings chair who understood that this program was necessary, vital, but needed to be modified. And when we look at some of the buildings in New York City that are in the most severe disrepair, where tenants are living in the most unacceptable conditions, and private landlords care not one bit, we need the third-party transfer program to come in and ensure that we hold those landlords accountable, get them out of the way, and deliver the conditions that tenants deserve. That has to come first always. And we need the city to have every tool in its arsenal to be able to step up, intervene, and improve conditions. We cannot get stuck in bureaucratic purgatory. We cannot wait. We cannot delay. We must act. That is what tenants deserve. That is, as elected officials, that is our most solemn responsibility, is to step up and hold bad landlords accountable to make sure that tenants live in good conditions. And with this new reformed, targeted, I think improved third-party transfer program, that is exactly what we'll be able to do. It took political courage to develop this bill because we know about the history. And I'm really grateful that we have a council member and a chair who has the courage and the smarts and the compassion to actually step up and deliver for tenants. So thank you so much, and thank you to the great coalition of supporting it.
Councilmember Oswald Feliz, whose district has the highest count of open B and C class violations.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilmember Oswald Feliz, representing District 15. Prior to getting elected to the City Council, I was a tenant lawyer, and this bill reminds me of my first day as a tenant lawyer. I remember going to this building to meet with the tenants, met with them in the building lobby to learn about the apartment conditions and the building conditions. And during that meeting, you could hear the rats racing in the walls. You could hear the rats at all hours of the day racing around the apartment and building walls. Just imagine the mental health effects that had on people living there. Also the safety-related challenges that could have created. We need to make sure that every tenant has access to clean and safe living conditions. Living in an apartment building, living in your own home should not turn into a nightmare. And that is exactly what we're going to help achieve today by making sure that the third-party transfer program is improved. We have a lot of different programs, including this TPT program, to help tackle challenges like this one. But of course, this program has been defective in many different ways. And this bill will help improve it by making sure that, number one, we are specifically tackling the worst buildings in our city. Not any building, but specifically the worst buildings in our city. And number two, making sure that the ownership is transferred permanently to someone that is responsible, somebody that knows how to manage buildings, so that 2 years later we don't fall back to square one. And number three, making sure that tenants in the building be provided with the opportunity to purchase and own their own home. So I look very forward. I want to congratulate you, Councilmember Sanchez. I want to thank all the advocates, including the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition. Thank you for all the work on this bill. Look forward to the introduction, to getting it heard, and also making it law in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just so you're ready, I'm gonna call up CSS, followed by UHAB, ANHD, and FAC. So first up, Isaiah Thompson from Community Service Society.
So every year CSS surveys New Yorkers, mostly low-income New Yorkers. Last year we asked low-income renters in the city about the quality of their homes. More than a quarter of low-income renters, no matter the housing type, told our interviewers that clean water was a serious problem. That includes market rate housing, one of the richest cities in the world. A fourth of low-income renters not living in NYCHA said that leaks and mold were an issue. And 1 in 7 said that heat and hot water was a serious problem. We spend a lot of time at CSS focusing on the conditions facing public housing residents, but at least there's an expectation of transparency and accountability for public housing. Oftentimes, private landlords are not subject to scrutiny until it's too late, like in the deadly Twin Parks fire in 2022, or in the partial collapse at Morris Heights building last year. The Housing Rescue and Resident Protection Act gives the city the tool it needs not just to scrutinize bad landlords, but enforce health in our homes. By focusing on debt and the number of violations, this bill directs the third-party transfer program towards the worst actors. However, it does this in a way that centers equity. In the past, the city's municipal lien enforcement has zeroed in on communities of color, like Jamaica Queens, Bushwick, and Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, and parts of Silver Lake and Staten Island. But this bill puts checks in place to ensure fairness and provide an option for tenants who've had enough and take matters into their own hand and purchase their buildings, creating more stable social housing. Lately, the housing conversation has been about supply, and we are really in a housing affordability crisis and desperately need affordable housing. But we're also in what we call the other housing crisis, a health crisis. And the Housing Rescue and Resident Protection Act gives the city the tools it needs to address it in the right way. So thank you.
Well said. Now I'd like to call up Ariel Hirsch from UHAB.
Hi everybody, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ariel Hirsch and I'm the Director of Policy at UHAB. For 50 years, UHAB has helped low and moderate income New Yorkers take control of their housing and steward it as affordable homeownership in perpetuity. We've transformed over 1,000 distressed rental units into safe and stable homes where residents have the opportunity for affordable homeownership. And we've done much of that through the third-party transfer program. This is a difficult bill, a difficult moment, and a difficult subject to discuss. And before we talk about the bill, I especially want to acknowledge how traumatizing the last round was for so many low and moderate income residents and homeowners, especially those of color in communities targeted for speculation and predatory scams. That said, it is also unacceptable for New Yorkers to live through disinvestment, neglect, and abandonment. I have seen too many residents, St. Davidson at 705 and 709 West 170th Street, and tenants across the city fight uphill to address repairs and live in safety, which should be a right. The Housing Rescue and Resident Protection Act will uphold a critical tool to support residents in aging and distressed buildings, and I'm really proud to say that Councilmember Sanchez's team has done a phenomenal job in addressing those past injustices and improving on this program to ensure that it truly prioritizes the most distressed properties and folks most in need, that it improves outreach to residents, and that it helps homeowners get back on track before a crisis occurs and protects them from speculators and scams. All New Yorkers deserve the right to safe and dignified housing, and we are heartened to see the Council's action today to support that right. Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to call up ANHD, Emily Goldstein.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Goldstein. I'm the Director of Organizing and Advocacy with ANHD, which is the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. We're here with many of our member organizations today, Northwest Bronx, Fifth Avenue Committee, UHAB, CNYCN, I can't see everybody. Our members deal with both sides of this challenge of distressed housing in New York City. Our members are on the ground in buildings supporting tenant associations, trying to work with tenants who are living in appalling conditions to get what every human being should have, which is a healthy, safe home, and coming up against obstacle after obstacle. endless calls to 311, endless rounds of inspections, the onus being on tenants to endlessly go to housing court, and at the end of the day, no real accountability for bad landlords. Our members are also nonprofit affordable housing providers who both build and purchase existing affordable housing so that it can be properly renovated and preserved as permanently affordable housing. So much focus and so much attention in housing discussion is often on building new, building more, building. But if we aren't preserving the housing we have, then we're displacing tenants from their homes and we're essentially always running backwards. We have to have programs that are actually functional and effective to be able to transfer buildings whose landlords are frankly just violating the law in egregious ways into responsible hands, whether those are the hands of tenants interested in collective ownership or whether those are the hands of mission-oriented nonprofit developers. We need mechanisms to do that. We need tools and pathways to do that. We also need resources. And obviously, budget is a follow-up, but I'm going to emphasize it here. Those resources need to be pulled into place as well, and the program needs to recognize that the worse we let buildings get, the harder and more expensive it is on the back end to preserve those same buildings in the way that everybody ought to. So really appreciate everybody who's put time and effort into this building. Really appreciate the collaboration from Councilmember Sanchez, and look forward to working to move this program on the right track.
Thank you, Emily. I'd also like to acknowledge, I don't think I mentioned before, Cypress Hill Local Development Corporation is also here. And to close us out from the Fifth Avenue Committee, we have Sarah Bachu.
Hello, my name is Sarah Bachu, like Councilmember Sanchez said, and I'm the Director of Programs at Fifth Avenue Committee. We are a 46-year-old comprehensive community development corporation rooted in advancing racial, economic, and social justice. Through our work, we've preserved over 1,400 and built over 1,400 houses. We also have been able to bring more than 2,000 more homes through our pipeline to New York City very, very soon. Through the third-party transfer program, FAC has renovated and preserved hundreds of homes in the past, ensuring safe and quality affordable housing in New York City, while also helping the city collect uncollected taxes from owners. Many of these properties were small buildings with 3 to 8 units, with tenants who were low-income families, seniors, and people with disabilities. They lived without basic necessities like heat and hot water, as many of our tenants have said here, and they were often facing owners who were absent for years at a time. This program allowed the city to intervene and transfer these neglected properties to responsible and trusted nonprofits like Fifth Avenue Committee, enabling us to make the critical repairs that these buildings needed and to restore dignity to tenants' lives and to return these buildings as assets to our community. The updated bill really provides the welcome reforms that folks have been talking about today and really addresses the unaddressed past harms of Black and brown homeowners and low-income communities. It prioritizes the most distressed buildings with unpaid municipal debt and numerous violations, while also introducing the safeguards that low-income owners need. The bill also strikes a necessary balance by ensuring the city collects only what is owed in tax foreclosure cases, protects homeowners' equity, and safeguards tenants. It also prevents these buildings from becoming the hazards that we are experiencing today in New York City. So I want to thank our housing chair, Pierina Sanchez, and the rest of our council advocates for being our champion and bringing this bill. Thank you.
Amazing. So with that, just a reminder, this bill will be heard on Monday at 1 p.m. here at Chambers. We look forward to all of the public testimony, and thank you all so much for being a part of this process.
Yeah.